This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. If this isn't the show you were looking for, then that's okay. We probably still have whatever you were browsing for anyway. Action, suspense, drama, and even things that might make you feel good. No sci-fi though. We don't want folks calling us fake or anything. Here's what's coming up. We're heading to one part of the northern US border as it gears up to reopen to non-essential travel for the first time in more than a year. Then we're looking at the world of comedy and how, jokes aside, words can have real social impacts when certain communities are the punchline. But first, world leaders are continuing talks in Glasgow, Scotland this week for COP26, the UN's 26th climate change conference. It comes at a particularly urgent moment to address the global climate crisis. The countries have already made some progress agreeing to end deforestation by 2030. But with decades of man-made climate change already baked in, countries need to figure out how to drastically reduce emissions to limit the planet's long-term warming and sea level rise. And it's that sea level rise that's putting so many communities at risk for flooding and storms. The UN estimates more than 1/3 of the world's population, 2.4 billion people, live within 60 miles of a coast. And sea level rise can take a particular toll on the developing world. Villages, cities, even whole countries in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific that are close to sea level face the threat of being completely wiped out. You can see one notable example in Hong Kong, where the fishing village of Tai O has survived for hundreds of years, mostly on stilts, leading locals and tourists to call it the Venice of Hong Kong. But with sea levels rising and typhoons becoming stronger, the village's future is at risk. Newsy's Our New Reality series shows the effects of climate change around the world. In the latest entry, Richard Kimber reports from Hong Kong about how local climate experts are hoping new technology may help preserve the village's traditions.
It's a world away from Hong Kong's famous skyscraper skyline. The remote fishing village of Tai O is nestled at the edge of Hong Kong's most mountainous island, Lantau. Visitors come here to step back in time, enjoying locally caught dried seafood and wandering through the village's network of houses built on wooden stilts. But while tourism is keeping the local economy afloat, climate change is threatening to sink it. In 2008, the village was completely submerged by a tropical cyclone. 10 years later, the same thing happened again, forcing the evacuation of many local residents.
During the worst typhoon, the water came all the way up to here. I moved my valuables up to the shelf, but even then they were soaked and I lost everything.
Climate experts say global warming is causing the more extreme weather and causing it more often. Residents are worried the village may soon become uninhabitable, but despite the dangers, few want to leave.
Evacuating the village might be the easiest solution for removing the problem completely, but that's not what the local residents want because Tai O is such a special place. They see this as their ancestral homeland and no one wants to leave their roots behind.
It's not just typhoons and cyclones that threaten village life. Global warming is also causing sea levels here to rise.
There are measures in place to protect the village. This 200-metre-long seawall was built 10 years ago along the waterfront to reduce the effects of flooding. The local residents are worried it may take more than this in the longer term to prevent the impact of more extreme weather.
Researchers at Hong Kong's University of Science and Technology are trying to help. They're using high-tech software to predict typhoon activity.
In the recent decades, as the supercomputers develop, you can have smaller and smaller cells in the computer modeling, so you can have more details and more accuracy in the calculation.
That's helping local authorities to issue weather warnings earlier and with more precision.
If there's a typhoon forming in the ocean, we know which direction it's heading, whether it's going to come to Hong Kong or actually to northern part of China or actually to the Vietnam.
His colleague, Professor Christine Low, is Hong Kong's former Undersecretary for the Environment. She says the research taking place in the city has global significance.
We have extreme conditions in Hong Kong, extreme high density of population, extremely tall buildings, squeezed on an extremely small piece of land. So you could say that any solution and insight that we have from Hong Kong will work elsewhere. So this is a great laboratory for dealing with these things.
Local residents in Tai O are hoping that global interest in its local battle with climate change will help drive innovations that can preserve not just its historic infrastructure, but also the village's traditional way of life. Richard Kimber for Newsy, Hong Kong.
Up next, we'll give you more details on the vaccine rollout for young kids and catch you up on today's trending topics. Welcome back, gang. As you all know, it's hump day, and if you've been struggling this week, just keep in mind that at least you didn't have to take your L at home, like the Astros. Here's what's trending. The CDC now recommends children ages 5 to 11 years old be vaccinated against COVID-19 using Pfizer-BioNTech's pediatric vaccine. This expands vaccine access to 28 million kids. The announcement isn't all that surprising considering the CDC advisory panel gave their approval earlier Tuesday, and the FDA approved this vaccine for this age group last week. The vaccination process for kids follows a routine similar to how many teens and adults were vaccinated. 2 doses, 3 weeks apart. Only difference here, kids 5 to 11 will receive a dose that's about a third of the original Pfizer-BioNTech formula. Oh, and they get smaller needles too. Despite the lower dosage, studies found the pediatric vaccine to be nearly 91% effective at preventing kids from getting COVID-19. The CDC's decision comes as hospitalization rates for young adults reached their highest level since the start of the pandemic. The city of Benton Harbor, Michigan has been dealing with a water crisis in recent months due to high levels of lead in its tap water, and now the EPA is getting involved. Federal regulators are directing the city to improve water quality for residents. Benton Harbor will now need to improve its water treatment and disinfection procedures to bring its water supply in compliance with federal law. Residents of the majority Black city, many of whom are low income, have been advised to drink bottled water for nearly a month. In a statement about the new order, EPA Administrator Michael Reagan said in part, "The people of Benton Harbor have suffered too long." Today is National Sandwich Day. Yeah, even sandwiches get holidays. In stores across the country, including chains like Subway, Jersey Mike's, and Panera, they're offering deals. But another chain known for its sandwich with 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, and 3 pieces of bread is offering its take on a new trend in sandwich making, the meatless option. McDonald's is rolling out the McPlant, its first offering to use plant-based meat, in 8 restaurants starting today. Carl's Jr. and Burger King are among the chains that have already introduced so-called meatless meat options. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention their predecessors though, the Impossible Burger and Beyond Meats. We don't know yet how many people are choosing meatless options over traditional burgers and sandwiches, but that switch could help make a small difference in greenhouse gas emissions. The UN estimates that farming livestock for meat is responsible for almost 15% of all emissions. The last couple of years have been tough for families and businesses that rely on easy border crossings from the US into Canada or Mexico. With pandemic travel restrictions in place, communities relying on previously lax borders have been separated. But that's set to change on November 8th, when the US is set to fully reopen its land border crossings to vaccinated travelers. In the meantime, at least one border area has provided a rare intersection between the US and Canada. National correspondent Maya Rodriguez went to the National Peace Arch on the Washington-British Columbia border and has more on how it's provided a crucial link for people on both sides.
In between 2 border checkpoints for 2 nations sits one monument. This is the Peace Arch.
The park is a solace, it's a refuge.
Inscribed at the top, the words, "Children of a Common Mother," a reminder of the close ties between the U.S. and Canada. Ties that also bind the people here.
My dad was from England, my mom was from Vancouver, BC. They came to America to raise their babies. And I arrived when I was 3 days old. Been here ever since.
Christina Winkler is president of the International Peace Arch Association and lives in Blaine, Washington, right near the border. For her and many here, COVID wreaked havoc on the land border crossing. and their lives.
What we have been through with the border closure and these families is really unimaginable.
Neither could those whose business is the border.
It was so heavily restricted that it was closed to the vast majority of people that would typically cross it.
Lori Trautman is director of the Border Policy Research Institute at Western Washington University. She says border communities on the U.S. side, which tend to be smaller and more rural and rely heavily on Canadian visitors, have been hit hard.
It was pretty staggering, especially things like the gas tax. Communities here that are adjacent to the border can put in an additional fuel tax, and that really drew on Canadians who would come over and fill up their tanks when they were going shopping.
But worse, she said, was the feeling that border communities felt ignored by both the U.S. and Canadian governments.
I don't think that people in borderland communities were really heard by either administration, and particularly by the White House. We need a land border. That's how we're tied together, and that's how we've evolved together.
But amid all the restrictions at the border, something unexpected happened back at Peace Arch Park, a renewed purpose. Because of its unusual location, spanning both sides of the border, it's become a place where people can come in from both countries and meet one another freely, as long as they don't venture beyond the park's borders.
I have been brought to tears many times. I have seen people see their grandbabies for the first time after a year and a half.
All because of a park with a special arch, celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. Its builders came back from World War I and survived the Spanish flu pandemic, finally finishing the arch in 1921, and leaving behind one last message: may these gates never be closed.
So if they can go through a war and a pandemic and come home and survive tough times and leave us, their children, a beautiful gift like this, I think it's a great place for us to start.
The hope here now is that any step towards normalcy is a step in the right direction so that these gates can remain open for a century more and beyond. Along the U.S.-Canada border near Blaine, Washington, I'm Maya Rodriguez.
Many thanks for that reporting, Maya. We have a quick break coming up, but stay with us because when you're back, we look into how rural communities are trying to keep their young professionals from heading to bigger cities.
What do you think the future looks like?
From Newsy, renowned journalists and filmmakers, comes a celebration of storytelling.
Are we in a killer robots arms race right now?
When the suspect admits to it,
I'm not going to argue the law with you.
New features every week. Newsy Docs presents Sunday nights at 9/8 Central, only on Newsy.
Welcome back, gang. A lot of young, fresh college grads looking for jobs are drawn to that big city life. No lie, I wanted to move to New York City and go broke while trying to become a journalist. For many decades now, small communities across the U.S. have been getting smaller, while big cities get bigger, in large part driven by young folks making that move. But when those young professionals leave, it often leaves rural areas struggling to maintain and attract their workforce. National correspondent Chris Conti shows us how one partnership is working to change that.
Mother Nature is rarely this kind to Mount Washington. Bathed in sunlight and blue skies, days like this are the exception here. This mountain is home to the highest recorded man-measured wind speeds in the world. It is also home to the world's first mountain climbing railway, known simply around here as the COG.
All aboard!
John Steinhauer is one of the conductors. Tourists from all over the world flock here to catch a ride on this train. The views of New England from up here are stunning.
The snow season here runs from July 1st to June 30th.
But getting up this mountain is a major feat of engineering and ingenuity. This operation is about as small business as they come. Each diesel-powered engine is custom built in a warehouse at the base of Mount Washington.
Just like everybody else, it's been a rough year getting staff.
Problem is, like most businesses across the country, there is a shortage of mechanics and engineers needed to keep this place going. Rob Airy is with the railway.
New Hampshire's had a hard time of keeping skilled workers. They always tend to leave out of state.
Which is why the old cog railway, first constructed in 1868, is about to offer new opportunities to a whole new generation of the rural workforce.
This is the first step in us keeping our local kids that are here in the local schools, learning here, falling in love with us, as a place to work.
The field's not as simple and straightforward as it used to be, where if you could use a wrench, you could start fixing stuff.
Mark Pouliot is an instructor at nearby White Mountains Community College. He has about 30 students in his program, all of whom are now eligible to apply for a new internship program with the Cog Railway.
This gives us a direct connection for a student to have a place to go work, either for their co-op or upon graduation.
The idea is simple: connect students with job training opportunities working on those diesel engines which power the cog. Not only will the program help graduating students get into a job pipeline that desperately needs them in rural America, the concept is also aimed at keeping kids from leaving rural communities like this one once they graduate, a term typically referred to as rural flight.
Plant that seed and get them thinking about, I don't have to move out of state to find a good paying job.
For as pretty as it may be, many students leave rural areas like this one after graduation for jobs in big cities. Perhaps the biggest challenge when it comes to keeping students in rural communities after they graduate is pay. On average, students can earn about 10 to 20% more on their first job if they move to a big city versus out here, which can be a big deal, especially when it comes to paying off student loans.
What are we going to do in rural communities to keep them viable, sustainable, and, what's the future for young people in these communities?
Dee Davis is an expert in rural growth and development. With the pandemic and remote work, he sees new opportunities for smaller communities to grow.
So it's all the technology that is at the very cutting edge that they wouldn't even probably get at the community college. So it's really neat for them to be able to come in here and see some of this new technology and learn it firsthand.
Like the trains here themselves, the hope is the whole idea will keep students' careers climbing in the communities they call home. I'm Chris Conti for Newsy.
While some places struggle to find workers, there are people who no longer have the ability to work at all. For some COVID long haulers, their symptoms have lasted for months with no clear end in sight, and they may never be able to go back to work again. Advocacy groups are fighting to get these unemployed long haulers the support they need. National correspondent Chris Stewart takes us along one woman's journey as she struggles to get back on her feet after her diagnosis.
I prayed all the way across the stage, and when I got there, this was the moment I was thanking God.
The pictures we keep often reflect the most important moments of our lives.
This is my husband and me on the last trip that we took to Vegas in 2019, before COVID.
For Marjorie Roberts, the images in her frames show a life she says she will never have again.
Growing up, your parents and the world tell you, go to the military, get a job, work, buy a house. I did everything.
Prior to the pandemic, she managed a gift shop at a hospital in Atlanta.
My life was good. It wasn't perfect.
She says not long after the gift shop closed in March of 2020, she felt the symptoms.
That morning I woke up, I was fine. I was fine. And by the time the sun went down at night, my life had forever changed. And I just felt bad. The fatigue, and it all just happened, it happened so quick.
She is one of our country's earliest COVID-19 survivors, but now, around 20 months later, her battle continues.
This is an oxygen meter.
Doctors found damage to her lungs, her liver, and she even lost teeth since she had COVID.
7 teeth at once in the front of my mouth.
Marjorie says as a COVID-19 long hauler, it is hard to work. She's a certified life coach.
I still have no energy. I do walk. It took me months to be able to walk up this block.
She says while COVID-19 has hurt her health, it's also hurt how she and her husband get by.
So we went from a 2-income house, savings, to him. It's all on him.
We all know someone who has been directly impacted by this. Many of them are still suffering.
Chris Kocher is the leader of COVID Survivors for Change. The nonpartisan nationwide group is reaching out to lawmakers across the country for more money to go directly to long haulers, many of whom are now struggling to make a living. In July, the Biden administration issued new guidance that said COVID long haulers may qualify for government disability assistance, but Kocher says more work needs to be done.
This is a new condition, this is a new disease, and so we need to make sure that we are listening, the medical system is listening to the people who have COVID first and foremost.
This is where magic takes place.
These days, Marjorie spends much of her time praying with her dog Healer by her side. She also leads a weekly support group for COVID-19 long haulers like herself.
It's all right. We stick together because we all we got.
The truth about long-haul COVID is that at this point, there is much we don't know.
I'm going to be okay because I have to. I have no choice.
While doctors work to find answers, those suffering like Marjorie say they can only try and move past its impact on their bodies, their lives, and their livelihoods. I'm Chris Stewart reporting.
You may have seen it in your own family or a family you know, adults losing their independence as they get older. It can be heartbreaking if it happens to somebody you love, but as Vanessa Mashanya found, new research shows it's not just genetics determining how long you remain independent.
Think about your location, your zip code. Maybe you're there because you moved for work, or maybe because your family has never known another one. Maybe you're there because you had nowhere else to go. Of all the things that determine it, your zip code may actually be a major factor in how long you live independently.
One finding leads to another.
Dr. Thomas Gill is a professor at Yale, and for the last 22 years, he and his team of researchers have been following a group of more than 750 senior citizens, interviewing them every month and documenting changes in their functions. More than 100 papers have been published about different findings from this study. The latest one paired their research with what's called the Area Deprivation Index, a tool by the University of Wisconsin which quantifies the level of advantage or disadvantage a neighborhood has, down to the zip code.
And we compared those who were living in neighborhoods that were disadvantaged versus those who were in more advantaged neighborhoods and found fairly striking findings.
What they found is that those in their study living in more advantaged neighborhoods were able to stay independent for more than 2 years than those living in disadvantaged neighborhoods. Dr. Gill foresees these findings having both policy, such as making a case for more available housing in advantaged neighborhoods, and clinical applications.
Just making clinicians aware that it's not necessarily individual decisions that are leading to these poor outcomes, but there's this overlay of disadvantage at a higher level, this neighborhood level, that are posing really immense challenges.
When an older adult loses their independence, it can have severe financial impacts to their family. A 2015 survey by the AARP and the National Association of Caregivers reported that 36% of caregivers have moderate to high levels of financial strain. So how can you prevent losing independence for as long as possible? Dr. Gill recommends 150 minutes of exercise a week, starting as soon as you can. And that exercise can be as simple as walking.
There's more evidence to support that than almost any other type of medical intervention. There's no pill that is effective as physical activity, particularly walking.
Proactive thinking to hopefully stave off letting your zip code determine your future. I'm Vanessa Mashanya reporting.
Up next, we're talking about what happens when comedy is not all fun and games. See you soon.
Sunday nights, Newsy takes you to the edge. Exploring untold stories.
It's literally an existential threat.
Going far beyond the headlines.
Today, social media is the real world.
Hey, grandkids. There needs to be a bridging of the gap.
In real life, a next generation news magazine. New episodes, Sunday nights at 8:30, 7:30 Central, only on Newsy.
On this show, I like to have a little fun and try out some material for my imaginary tight 5-minute stand-up set, when appropriate. I wouldn't call myself a comedian though, unless you wanted to call me that. What I'm trying to say is that I'm a big fan of cracking jokes, but it's worth considering the real cultural impact jokes can have. By now, you've probably heard about the pushback from Netflix employees against Dave Chappelle's new comedy special, calling his jokes transphobic. And this wouldn't be the first time he's been called out. That got us thinking more broadly about the cultural impacts of comedy. There's actually some data out there that shows what kind of consequences comedy, TV, and movies can have on LGBTQ folks. For example, one survey found that 20% of trans people reported experiencing verbal discrimination that stemmed from transgender representation in media. That's 1 in 5 trans people. Groups like GLAAD have noted how anti-gay jokes can give a green light to hurtful acts against LGBTQ folks and have a real impact on LGBTQ youth. The Trevor Project found in its national 2021 survey that 42% of LGBTQ youth considered attempting suicide in the past year, including 52% of transgender and non-binary youth. So according to the stats, many folks in these communities would say words matter, even if they're coming at you as a setup, delivery, and punchline, in that order. If we take it back to the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, stand-ups of well-known comedians were riddled with commentary that definitely would not fly today. From Eddie Murphy joking about AIDS, to Jimmy Kimmel wearing blackface, and Jay Leno repeatedly making jokes about Asian people. In recent years, these comedians and many others have apologized, but that same sort of comedy is still out there in the mainstream. It's just often directed at other communities. To that point, while some may say cancel culture is ruining comedy, a lot of these comedians have had very successful careers despite their missteps. Chappelle has been ragging on the trans community for years, and through 2020, he won the Grammys for Best Comedy Album 3 years in a row. So it doesn't look like anybody's getting canceled by this comedy. In fact, according to the stats in social science, the real impacts are following the communities that are used for punchlines. All right, so we want to stay on this topic a little bit longer, and to do that, we're going to bring in an expert. Her research explores the impacts of media on marginalized groups, specifically LGBTQ youth. And Lauren has also done some research on transgender representation in the media. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us on ITL.
Thank you so much for having me.
As we've seen representation of LGBTQ people in movies and TV shows increase over the past few decades, I'm curious to know, where does it still fall short?
Historically, representations of LGBTQ people have been limited to stereotypes, to caricatures, and to honestly, explicitly negative representations. Those negative representations, those explicitly negative representations are decreasing because they're becoming less socially acceptable. The youth I talk to talk a lot about the lack of LGBTQ BIPOC characters, that is, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The youth I talk to also talk a lot about a lack of diverse sexual and gender identities when the characters they see in mainstream media exist, that they are very one-dimensional, that their whole identity is about their LGBTQ-ness, that the whole storyline for them is about being LGBTQ, that they're nothing outside of being LGBTQ, and that they tend to be stereotypical in their careers, in their appearance. And the young people I talk to say, that's not me. And what they do talk about is that good depictions of LGBTQ identities can really open up opportunities for conversation and open up opportunities for them to disclose their identities and to feel safe.
Lauren McEnroy from Ohio State University. I want to thank you so much for joining us here on ITL. We appreciate you giving us your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here.
When we're back, we'll bring you the story of an Arizona election official facing serious threats from voters who were unhappy with the results. After a months-long controversial audit of the 2020 election results in Arizona's Maricopa County, the results backed up the original findings. President Biden won the district, and there was no evidence of fraud. The former chairman of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, Clint Hickman, is a Trump supporter himself, but he's faced death threats from people who believe he helped steal the 2020 presidential election for Biden. Our partners at the Washington Post show us what this election official's life has looked like since the election and the January 6th attack on the Capitol.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to let you know that I happen to have some knowledge of people that are going to be coming and visiting the homes of the Board of Supervisors and basically executing their families. Should be fun.
I have been a Maricopa County supervisor for probably over 8 years now. I was chairman before, during, immediately after, all the way to January 6th. And the threats never abated.
Hey, Clint, you f***ing liar. We're going to f***ing hang you, traitor. We're going to make an example out of you. Yes. You altered my election, you piece of shit.
The ones that trouble me most are, I know you. Do you not understand that we work in the restaurants you eat at? Do you not understand that we know where your kids go to school? It's horrific, and I'm trying to keep my family away from it, but and to tell you the truth, it really troubles me when people that know me and have known me since I've been young are capable of promoting some of this. I believe people have gone down this track so deep that no matter what is said by myself or what happens to any of us supervisors, the belief will always be that we somehow had a hand in rigging an election.
This election will not be stolen from us.
I had worked 7 months worth of time doing things that I could do for the top of the ticket and President Trump.
Maricopa County Supervisor Clint Hickman. Thank you, Clint. Good job, Clint.
Just a couple weeks before the election, President Trump came out here. And still, I'm extremely proud that he called me out in the crowd and thanked me for everything that I tried to accomplish for him. So I thought about that while I was watching.
And that is Arizona. If you look at the numbers right now and drill down, Joe Biden has a lead by about 7 points with 3/4 of the vote tabulated.
As I was watching deeper and deeper into the night, it wasn't looking good. And then when Fox News called it, I had to pick my jaw up.
The Fox News decision desk is calling Arizona for Joe Biden. That is a big get for the Biden campaign.
Then we started to get reports, I believe, that night that some people started trickling over to Maricopa County Election Center and questioned the vote.
Count our votes! Count our votes! Do your duty for the American people!
And then it really sped up in the succeeding nights. That then it started to invite some people that were on one hardcore part of the spectrum, and I was worried about, if I was already worried about potential violence at poll sites, I got super worried when people started showing up and demonstrating between people whose cars are parked there just trying to do their job, which was to count votes.
Kelly, this is about your rights are being taken away from you. right now as we speak.
And it seemed like I was in this never land of answering 3 questions to one representative, and then somebody else would call, being ginned up with information that I couldn't refute yet, if ever. Because some of this stuff is so outlandish, you almost say, why am I taking any moment of my life to answer that? I don't know about Italian satellites. I don't.
They're trying to steal America from us, guys. Here, from Sharpies to votes, right? This is real.
And with that came threats of violence to my staff, threats of violence to anybody wearing a Maricopa County badge.
Did they protect our vote? Did the GOP protect our vote?
If we lose an election, we lose an election. That's it.
Okay. Hey, Clint, it's Kelly Ward. I just talked to President Trump, and he would like me to talk to you and also see if he needs to give you a call to discuss what's happening on the ground in Maricopa.
Hey, Clint, it's Rudy Giuliani. I was very happy to see that there's going to be a forensic audit of the machines, and I really wanted to talk to you about it a bit. The president wanted me to give you a call, all right?
Hello, sir. This is the White House operator. I was calling to let you know that the president's available to take your call if you're free. If you could please give us a call back, sir, that'd be great. You have a good evening.
That was the second call that I received from the White House switchboard. But in a free democracy, elections result in some people's candidate losing. I was disappointed in the outcome of a couple races, and I was extremely happy with the outcome in others. But I'm not going to violate the law or deviate from my own moral compass, as some have pushed me to do, and some have probably pushed others to do here. I had already suffered through people coming to my house on one Sunday night, 90 strong. I'd had enough, honestly, and I was frustrated. And leading up to January 6th, which was a Wednesday formal day, I knew that we were going to be motioning forward and instituting a new chairman of the board. And I thought, as I was driving that morning, after living through all of this, I thought, I can't help it, but this albatross is going to be taken off my shoulders.
Mr. Chair.
Bill.
I will say it. You saved lives. We'll never know how many, but you saved many, many lives because of your leadership. And I don't know what's more important than that. But not only did you save lives, but I think, and I'll say it, you helped save democracy in Maricopa County this year. You stood up as a man, as a leader, to defend the process, a process that is about to be challenged today in Washington, D.C. But I have no doubts that we did the right thing.
So I appreciate that. And I'm going to say that should wrap it up, Bill, because I can't take it. So as I was driving home, I heard there was some protests going on in Washington, D.C. I roll in, and there were 2 Maricopa County Sheriff's deputies waiting on me in my driveway. And threats had been called in during this time frame, and they wanted to talk to me about it. And I'm talking to Marty, the one in charge of my protection, and he said, they're storming the Capitol. I looked and said, what? And my wife opens the front door and said, are you done talking? You need to come in here and see this. And I walked in on the big screen. It was the first things of people beating on the door and breaking the windows. I mean, how can people behave like this? And I'm watching that. And then Marty said, you're not staying in this house tonight. You please do not stay in this house tonight. And I said, I'm out. I'm out. My wife and I started packing bags for the kids, and we went to an undisclosed location.
Do you know where the clips are for these, Kathy? Are they in that basket?
I've had probably 3 or 4 different people tell me just within the last month they always thought that maybe they could give their time and effort to run for public office, and they are reticent to do it now. And they're like, I don't know if I could put up with it. I was like, well, I don't know how much longer I can put up with it either, but if we don't have good people doing it, then bad people will do it, and then we have serious problems.
When you're back, we're closing the loop on today's top stories. But you know I'm about to ask you for something. If you have a free moment during the break, go ahead and give us a shout on social using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. I mean, you're going to be on your phone anyway, right?
A Newsy primetime television event. A global climate crisis. Our new reality. A changing planet. All this week starting at 8/7 Central, only on Newsy.
And we're back. Our time together is almost over, but before you go find whatever show you might have actually been looking for before stumbling into this, we're closing the loop on our top stories. First, we took you to the fishing village of Tai O in Hong Kong, where local climate experts are trying to save it from rising sea levels.
Visitors come here to step back in time, enjoying locally caught dried seafood and wandering through the village's network of houses built on wooden stilts. But while tourism is keeping the local economy afloat, climate change is threatening to sink it. In 2008, the village was completely submerged by a tropical cyclone. 10 years later, the same thing happened again, forcing the evacuation of many local residents.
During the worst typhoon, the water came all the way up to here. I moved my valuables up to the shelf, but even then they were soaked and I lost everything.
It's not just typhoons and cyclones that threaten village life. Global warming is also causing sea levels here to rise. Researchers at Hong Kong's University of Science and Technology are trying to help. They're using high-tech software to predict typhoon activity.
In the recent decades, as the supercomputers develop, we can have smaller and smaller cells in the computer modeling, so you can have more details and more accuracy in the calculation.
And to another top story. By now, you've probably heard about the pushback from Netflix employees against Dave Chappelle's new comedy special, calling his jokes transphobic. And this wouldn't be the first time he's been called out. That got us thinking more broadly about the cultural impacts of comedy. There's actually some data out there that shows what kind of consequences comedy, TV, and movies can have on LGBTQ folks. For example, one survey found that 20% of trans people reported experiencing verbal discrimination that stemmed from transgender representation in media. That's 1 in 5 trans people. Groups like GLAAD have noted how anti-gay jokes can give a green light to hurtful acts against LGBTQ folks and have a real impact on LGBTQ youth. The Trevor Project found in its national 2021 survey that 42% of LGBTQ youth considered attempting suicide in the past year, including 52% of transgender and non-binary youth. Thanks for joining us for this episode of In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. That's a wrap for now, but we hope to see you back soon. We got more coming your way right here on Newsy.